On my birthday, my son told the waiter, "She's not with us." And just like that, I became a stranger in the restaurant I helped build. I arrived 10 minutes early, wore my best coat, the same one I wore when I signed the first investment check that saved this business from collapse, the one with the stitched inner pocket where I used to keep candy for my granddaughter. The coat may have looked dated now, but it had history. My history. "Name?" the young hostess asked without looking up. I gave it calmly. She typed, paused, tilted her head. "No reservation under that name," she said with a rehearsed smile that didn't touch her eyes. I believe my son made it. She glanced behind me at the door, then at my shoes. Old, polished but old. "Sorry," she said again, tone clipped. "We're fully booked tonight. Walk-ins aren't allowed." "I'm not a walk-in." Now she looked at me. Really looked. For the first time. Her eyes scanned my coat, my face, the quiet way I stood. No designer bag, no glittering jewelry. And then came the sentence that burned sharper than the winter air behind me. "Please wait outside." I stepped back into the cold, the wind biting my skin. Through the frosted window I saw them, my son, my daughter-in-law, my granddaughter, all seated, all smiling. A cake already on the table. My place? Empty. I pulled the collar of my coat tighter. They didn't forget me. They just didn't want me included. And in that moment, as people brushed past me into the warmth, as I stood where only cold belonged, I realized this wasn't about a lost reservation. It was about something far colder. Deliberate erasure. Dignity tested. And the kind of silence that comes right before a reckoning. Friends, let me pause for just a moment. Could you do something for me? Write in the comments. Where are you listening from? And tell me, has anything like this ever happened to you or someone you love? If this story touches your heart, consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. That small act helps us grow this channel and keep telling stories that matter. Now let's continue. From the sidewalk, I watched them. The windows of the restaurant were fogged slightly at the edges from the warmth inside. Soft golden lights hung overhead, casting a gentle glow on the white tablecloths and glimmering glassware. Inside, laughter echoed. Familiar voices, distant now. My family, my blood, seated without me. My son caught sight of me and raised a hand in an awkward, half-hearted wave. A gesture so thin it could have been mistaken for a reflex. The waiter beside him leaned in, whispering something, then turned to glance at me through the glass. He shook his head, lips moving with the phrase I would never forget. "She's confused." I heard it, clear as if the glass weren't there at all. "She's confused." Not "she's waiting." Not "that's the woman who—" Just a quiet dismissal of a presence they no longer found convenient. My son didn't correct him. My daughter-in-law, sitting upright in her velvet dress, her hand around a flute of champagne, didn't even look my way. Her eyes fixed on the menu, on the server, on the ceiling, anywhere but me. She sipped her drink with practiced grace, as if pretending I wasn't outside would somehow make it true. And my granddaughter, she laughed. Not cruelly, not in mockery, just innocently, which somehow cut deeper, because she didn't even glance toward the window. Didn't ask why the seat beside her remained empty. Didn't miss me. They had set the table without me, ordered without me, begun the celebration, without even checking if I was allowed in. I watched as they clinked glasses. My son leaned in to tell a joke. My daughter-in-law threw her head back in a laugh that belonged in another world. The warmth between them felt foreign now, like something I was never part of. And still I stood there, coat tight around me. Not knocking, not begging, just watching. Holding the weight of 1,000 small betrayals in my chest, breathing through the ache of invisible love. I wasn't confused. I was excluded. Deliberately. And they knew it. Every single one of them. But the thing about being erased is that the people doing it often forget something critical. The one they push outside is often the one who built the walls to begin with. Inside, the candles flickered. 12 of them, one for each year of her life. A perfect little cake sat in the center of the table, its pink frosting glowing beneath the chandelier's warmth. The same chandelier I helped them choose when this restaurant was nothing more than a blueprint and a dream. My granddaughter beamed. Her eyes sparkled with the easy joy of a child surrounded by people who she believed would always protect her. And once, long ago, I was that person. I was her protector. The arm she fell asleep in during storms. The lap where she read her first books. the voice that told her bedtime stories and hummed lullabies when the night felt too big. She used to call me her safe place. But now she sat at a table I wasn't welcome at. No one paused to wait for me. No one turned toward the door to check if I had been let in. There was no empty chair pulled out beside her. Only filled glasses, quiet smiles, and a celebration edited clean of the one who once held her tiny hand through every fever, every stumble, every tear. Then I saw it. Her mother lifting her flute of champagne, my son following suit. The waiter leaned forward with practiced timing to top off each glass. Everyone raised theirs together. And me? I raised my hand. Just instinct. A slow lift of fingers toward a memory. Toward the promise that birthdays were meant to be shared, especially between those who remember the day better than the one being celebrated. No one noticed. No one poured me a drink, not even water. The toast carried on without interruption, as if the years I spent loving her had been wiped clean from the record. I stood by the window, a ghost with a heartbeat, and watched them mouth words I couldn't hear. Their smiles widened. Their eyes twinkled. They toasted her growth, her beauty, her future. But they didn't toast legacy. They didn't toast sacrifice. They didn't toast the man who had once sold his watch to buy formula when her father had been between jobs, too proud to ask, too scared to provide. They toasted surface, because the roots had been buried deep, and I had been buried with them. As the glasses touched and laughter erupted again, I felt it. Not anger, not even sorrow, but a quiet detachment, like watching someone else's life unfold, one you used to belong to but no longer recognize. And in that moment, I realized something heartbreaking but true. You can carry someone through the hardest parts of their beginning, and still be written out of their celebration. That toast wasn't missing me. It had never expected me to be there at all. After what felt like an eternity in the cold, someone must have said something. Perhaps a quiet word from my son. Perhaps guilt knocking on the edge of his conscience. Because eventually, a staff member opened the door and gestured toward an empty seat. Not at their table, not even near them, but at a small corner table by the swinging kitchen doors, where the smell of bleach mingled with the scent of food, and waiters brushed past without looking twice. I walked in slowly, not out of hesitation, but out of heaviness, the kind that settles deep in your spine when dignity has been left outside in the wind. I removed my coat and laid it carefully across the back of the chair. No one came to greet me, no menus, no smiles, just the background clatter of cutlery and plates, the shouts from the kitchen, the muffled music playing overhead for other people's comfort. Eventually, a young waiter approached. He didn't introduce himself, didn't ask if I'd like a drink. He simply looked at me, then looked toward the larger table where my family sat, still laughing, still unaware or pretending not to be. "Are you with them?" he asked, glancing back and forth between us. I nodded. He looked me over. His eyes paused at the collar of my shirt, the soft fraying of the sleeves, the years my clothes carried with quiet pride. Then he said without warmth, "We'll bring the bill separate then." He didn't say it with malice, just assumption. That I didn't belong, that I couldn't afford, that I was here by accident, or worse, by guilted invitation. He saw my jacket, not my name. He saw wear, not worth. And in that moment, I realized how loudly people speak, without ever raising their voice. It wasn't the words that stung. It was what they implied, that I was an afterthought, a burden, someone to be managed quietly and billed separately, not family, not guest of honor, not the man who'd paid for the renovation of this very floor when my son's business partners backed out and the bank grew cold. I looked over to the table, to my family. Not one of them turned around. Not one lifted a hand or a glass or even their gaze. I wasn't the guest of honor. I was the ghost of obligation. And in a restaurant built on reputation, I was treated like someone dining beneath it. The food hadn't yet arrived, but the bitterness had. They say dignity is silent, that it doesn't demand to be seen. But in rooms like this, rooms dressed in linen and candlelight, silence can feel like invisibility. Or worse, like permission for others to treat you as though you were never there to begin with. I sat alone at the corner table, my back to the wall, watching the room breathe around me. Waiters danced between chairs with well-rehearsed grace. Glasses clinked. Laughter echoed. The scent of roasted lamb and white truffle drifted through the air like perfume. Other guests arrived, dressed in sharp suits and soft silk dresses. They were met at the entrance with familiarity. Names known, hands shaken, champagne poured before a single word was spoken. Their seats were pulled out for them, their coats taken gently, respectfully. And then there was me. A tall glass of water was placed in front of me without a word. No lemon, no napkin, no menu. Just water, the kind given out of necessity, not welcome. No one asked if I'd like anything else. No one asked if I was celebrating something. And I was, or I should have been. It was her birthday. My granddaughter, the one whose middle name I had chosen, the one I once held steady as she took her first shaky steps on a kitchen floor, I helped lay with my bare hands. But that history didn't fit in this room anymore. It wasn't printed on the wine list. It wasn't stitched into the monogram napkins. The longer I sat there, the more I noticed it. The stares. Some subtle, some not. They glanced at me the way people look at a stain on a white shirt. With discomfort, with a question they never ask aloud. Who let him in? What is he doing here? And then came the moment that settled deep into my bones. My son's colleague, a man I had met once years ago when I still attended business dinners and had a name people remembered, walked past me on his way to the restroom. He stopped, looked down at me, and smirked. He leaned in just enough to make sure I heard it. Sad, he said quietly, almost pitying, how some people just don't know when they're no longer welcome. And then he walked away. He didn't recognize me. He didn't see the man who had once signed the first check that funded his boss's dream. He saw an old coat, a forgotten place, an unwanted presence. And the worst part, he wasn't entirely wrong. I was no longer welcome. Not because I'd done something wrong, but because I no longer fit the image they wanted to project. Because love in some families has a dress code. And mine was 10 years out of season. The ice in my glass melted. The room got louder. But I had never felt so invisible. I didn't touch the water, not because I wasn't thirsty, but because I had already swallowed far more than I should have ever been made to. They spoke of the tasting menu as if it were a pilgrimage, 5 carefully curated courses, each played a testament to the chef's genius. Butter-poached scallops, wild mushroom risotto, seared duck breast with cherry gastrique, truffle-scented potato puree, and a final swan song of dark chocolate ganache. The kind of meal reserved for the city's elite, garnished with half-melted gold leaf and whispered praises. I waited. First came a basket of bread, warm, yes, but nothing a corner bakery couldn't provide. I tore off a piece and tasted nothing but air. No herb butter, no olive oil drizzle, only the hollow echo of being an afterthought. A waiter offered refills on water, still no lemon, and moved on. No question of appetite, no offer of the amuse-bouche that had delighted their other guests. I closed my eyes and breathed in the flavors dancing beyond the window pane. The warm scent of fresh bread, the soft murmur of cutlery, the gleam of candlelight on polished silver. I thought of the vineyard I built, row upon row of Chenin Blanc vines bathed in summer sun, grapes bursting with promise because of my hands and sleepless nights. The harvest I supervised, the barrels I tasted, the contracts I negotiated, all so this city of fine living could sip estate wine with reverence. And then I heard the clink of corks and the gentle pour of something pale and honeyed. My eyes snapped open. They brought my glass at last, a slender flute of white that caught the light like captured dawn. I lifted it, curious, and found the label embossed with a name I knew better than my own reflection. The vineyard, my vineyard. I held that glass at arm's length, watching it tremble slightly, as if uncertain it belonged in my hand. My family's glasses were refilled without question, and laughter swirled around me. I tasted the wine, crisp and clean, bursting with the sun and soil I had nurtured. Every drop was my story. The seasons, the storms, the hope. No one thanked me. No one acknowledged the shared history between that bottle and the walls around us. They treated the wine as though it came from someone else's hard work, someone they approved of. I sat back, the weight of the breadbasket heavy in my lap, and the truth heavy in my heart. I had paid for this meal, yet I could not share it as a father, a grandfather, or a benefactor. I was a silent investor, invisible and uncelebrated, reduced to crumbs and water. And as I lifted the flute again, savoring the legacy they refused to honor, I realized that justice would require more than words. It would demand a reckoning, one that this table would never forget. Their laughter rose and fell like waves against a shore where I once stood firmly anchored. I watched as they spun new tales, anecdotes polished and rehearsed, each punchline favoring the mentor seated beside my son. He wore a tailored suit and a triumphant grin, basking in reflected glory. Once that man had been under my tutelage, learning the ropes of business and integrity. Now he occupied the place I had built, draped in the light of stories I had first told. They passed around plates of rich food and spoke of grand ideas for expansion, of pop-ups and partnerships, and awards that would bear that mentor's name. Every compliment to the restaurant, every nod to its roots, came wrapped in his identity as if my son had discovered him in a fable. I felt the fabric of my life being cut away, the threads I wove unspooling before me. The history we shared, the boardroom negotiations, the late-night strategy sessions, the faith I placed in that eager apprentice, had vanished. In its place was a narrative curated to exclude me, rebranded to showcase someone more convenient and more presentable to the world. I remembered the day I first showed that mentor the blueprint of this dining room, how his eyes lit up when I described the vaulted ceilings and handcrafted banquettes. I recalled the pride in his voice when he poured the first glass of my vintage for a critic's tasting. I remembered believing him to be my legacy's successor. But legacy is not a title passed by proximity. It is a torch carried forward only by those who honor where it came from. As the conversation swirled around me, I felt a quiet shift inside, an awakening of all the years of silent giving, all the background support, all the gratitude I never asked for yet never received. I realized they weren't just replacing a name on a plaque, they were erasing the invisible scaffold of love, the unspoken generosity, the hands that built every milestone they now celebrated. I looked at my granddaughter's face, illuminated by candlelight and the thrill of new tales. She believed every word, unaware of the blood and sweat behind her laughter. I looked at my son, watching him light up as he praised the man he called mentor, unaware of the man he had shoved to the margins. My heart ached with a sorrow deeper than any wound, a sorrow born from watching your own legacy slip away under your child's fingertips. And yet, as the table cheered, I felt a new resolve rise within me. If they could rebrand our history, they had also revealed its strength. For history, once known, cannot stay buried, and legacy, once acknowledged, cannot be undone. In that moment, I settled back in my chair, the edges of my coat brushing against the table's polished surface, and allowed myself the smallest, calmest smile. They may have rewritten the story here tonight, but the next chapter would belong to me. As the last notes of laughter drifted around the room, a waiter appeared with dessert. A delicate millefeuille dusted with powdered sugar, its layers crisp and sweet. I reached into the pocket of my coat and withdrew a slender envelope, its weight both light and heavy with intention. My hand hovered for a moment, the tremor in my fingers betraying the calm I tried to project. Then I slid it gently across the white linen, placing it so that the edge touched my son's plate. He looked down, his fork paused midair. For a heartbeat, I thought he might open it and see the fine print of acknowledgement, the name I'd signed in ink that day, the quiet list of gifts and grants I'd given to this place, to his dreams. But he did not. Instead, he exhaled softly, a sound I knew well, the weary breath of someone burdened by unspoken expectations. He lifted the envelope and, without a word, passed it to his wife. Her fingers closed around it like it was a thorn she carefully hid. I watched the thin paper disappear into the folds of her clutch, never to be unfolded. They treated it like a relic, tucked away, unremarkable and unwanted. In that small, deliberate gesture, I saw the final slide, the way one drifts from relevance until one's presence becomes a footnote, easily overlooked, easily ignored. The edges of the linen brushed against my coat as the waiter collected the empty plates. The candles flickered once more, casting long shadows that stretched toward me as though urging me back into the darkness outside. My granddaughter leaned forward for a taste of her dessert, her eyes bright with sugar and innocence. She didn't ask why I hadn't joined her. She didn't notice my empty fork waiting for crumbs that would never come. And in that hush, with the envelope lost to silence, I felt something crystallize inside me. The stark truth that sometimes, even the most tangible love, can be folded away without a second glance. The slide was silent, but its impact was deafening. They had turned my legacy into a whisper. And whispers, eventually they compel you to speak louder. The air shifted as the manager stepped forward. A polished man with a crisp suit and an even crisper smile he reserved for important guests. He clasped my son's shoulder and spoke in a low voice about continued support and generous patronage. Phrases that felt rehearsed, hollow. My son nodded, pleased, basking in the glow of false flattery. I cleared my throat. A single sound that cut through the murmur of conversation like a blade. Heads turned. The manager's smile flickered. He glanced at me, the stranger at the corner table, and then back at my son. The silence that followed was heavier than any number of spoken words. "I believe my signature is still on the endowment contract outside your office," I said, voice steady despite the storm ricocheting in my chest. The manager froze. His polished composure cracked. He swallowed, eyes darting to the framed documents lining the hallway behind him, to the plaque that bore the foundation's name in gold letters. My foundation, the one that provided scholarships to aspiring chefs, funded the renovation of the dining room, underwrote the staff's training, all silently, without fanfare, all under the name he now referred to as patronage from someone else. His throat worked. The quiet hum of the restaurant resumed around us, oblivious. My son's confident posture faltered. My granddaughter's laughter dimmed, curiosity pulling her gaze toward the tension crackling between us. The manager cleared his throat, lips pale, words failing him. He looked as though he'd been unmasked, his scripted gratitude revealed as an empty performance. The heat of the moment seeped into my veins, a mix of vindication and sorrow. I realized that this confrontation, long postponed, had become inevitable. Behind him, another waiter paused with a fresh carafe of water. He lingered, unsure whether to serve me or avert his eyes. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move. My son looked at me, confusion and wounded pride mingling in his glance. The daughter-in-law shifted uncomfortably, gripping the stem of her wine glass. And in that pregnant silence, I saw it all laid bare. The years of unacknowledged generosity, the betrayal stitched into every overlooked check, the reputation I had built and they had claimed. I took a breath and stood, letting the manager's frozen expression be the only answer he dared give. The contract outside his office bore my signature still, an indelible reminder that truth, like ink, endures. Then I turned away, leaving him and my family to reckon with a name they could no longer ignore. Etched in gold on the wall, engraved on the heart of the place we all once cherished together. I rose from my seat, my spine straight, the soft rustle of my coat echoing in the sudden hush. The chandelier above me glinted like a spotlight on a stage where I had been unseen for too long. I surveyed the faces gathered at the long mahogany table, my son's colleagues, the manager caught mid-apology, the mentor who had stolen my place, and then I spoke, voice low but unwavering. "The wine you serve? My vineyard? Those vines you admire, the harvest you applaud? That sun-kissed Chenin Blanc was born from my land, tended by hands I paid, bottled with my name in every stitch of the label?" I paused, letting the weight of each syllable settle. Heads craned toward me like stalks of grain seeking sun. I leaned forward, my fingertips brushing the table's polished surface. "The chef you praise, my scholarship. The talented cook who learned technique in kitchens, guided by my foundation, who graduated on my dime and returns now to thank me with his creations, was once a student in debt, a dreamer I chose to lift." The mentor's eyes flickered with guilt. "This building's expansion? My silent donation. When your investors faltered, when your boardroom met with closed doors, I signed the paperwork, wrote the checks, and watched the walls rise higher so your brand could sparkle brighter." The manager swallowed hard, sweat gathering at his brow. I lifted the tone of my voice just enough for my granddaughter to hear, to understand what pride really meant. "And the salaries? My foundation's quarterly gift, every paycheck that lined your pockets, every benefit you boasted of, every new hire you celebrated, they came from funds I entrusted year after year so this place could run without pause, without question." Silence reigned. Not a single blink, not a tremor in the glass. Even the soft hum of the kitchen seemed to hush in respect for the truth laid bare. They sat, mouths half open, their illusions shattered yet too stunned to speak. I stood calm, my quiet control the final punctuation on years of unspoken service. The truth hung in the air like a banner. The legacy they wore like a badge had been mine all along. My son's face registered shock, then shame, then something like regret, fleeting but there. My daughter-in-law's shoulders slumped. My granddaughter's gaze went from confusion to awe as though seeing me for the first time. And in that room of polished surfaces and false accolades, I realized that the most powerful voices are not the loudest. They are the ones who, standing on foundations built by others, choose finally to speak. No one moved. No one offered a comment. But as I turned away, the click of my shoes on the marble floor felt like the first step in a reckoning that would change everything. A weight descended over the room, thicker than any cloud. In that stretching moment, the world outside those walls paused. The clatter of dishes, the murmur of voices, even the soft violin playing overhead seemed to fade into the hush that followed my words. Waiters exchanged glances, uncertain whether to approach or disappear. The manager's face drained of color, his practiced composure crumbling into disbelief. My granddaughter's small voice broke the stillness, fragile and awed. She leaned forward, eyes wide with wonder and confusion, as though seeing the restaurant and me for the very first time. "You built this?" she asked, the question carrying years of unspoken stories. I met her gaze, feeling the tremor of truth passing between us. Her small hand gripped mine under the table, grounding me in a tenderness I had longed for all evening. I nodded, and the nod carried decades of silent labor, the early mornings walking the rows of vines, the late nights poring over scholarship applications, the discreet checks that kept kitchens humming and salaries paid. I had never sought recognition. I had sought only to give, believing that true generosity flourishes best when unseen. But generosity, when left unclaimed, can wither into regret. As the realization rippled through the room, I saw in their eyes the turning tide of understanding, the mentor's guilty shame, my son's swallowed remorse, the daughter-in-law's sudden loss of poise. They witnessed not just a confession, but the unearthing of every unseen sacrifice that had built this life for them. And in that charged silence, I pressed my granddaughter's hand and whispered, in a voice only she could hear, "I did, silently, so others could rise." The truth, finally spoken, spread like rings on water, small at first, but destined to reach every corner of this place, altering the course of all who thought they knew its story. The manager returned, his polished shoes echoing on the marble floor. He offered me a seat at the center table, one bathed in warm light, surrounded by familiar faces, offered with the kind of apology that carries more guilt than grace. "Sir," he said, voice trembling, "would you like to move to a better seat?" I looked at the empty chair, its cushion pressed smooth by absence, its place set meticulously. I felt the weight of its invitation, the promise of inclusion I had long ago earned but never claimed. My gaze drifted to the edge of the room, to my forgotten corner, where shadows still clung to the walls. "No," I answered softly, each syllable deliberate. The view from the margin showed me everything. A hush followed. The restaurant's soft hum seemed to shift around us, acknowledging the truth of my words. From the margin I had watched the real story unfold, the hesitant whispers, the unwitting betrayals, the hidden debts of gratitude. From the center, I would have seen only the polished performance, the carefully edited celebration. My son leaned forward then, his hand reaching across the table. His fingers brushed mine, an apology without words, a plea for forgiveness I had once given without question. I felt the tremor in his grip, the relief that came with his recognition of my pain. I did not pull away, but I did not offer warmth. My hand remained still, a quiet testament to trust broken and slowly mending. He felt the difference, the absence of the easy affection I once lavished, the cautious distance born of lessons learned too late. In that touch he understood how deep wounds heal, not with grand gestures, but with patient understanding. Around us, the staff resumed their duties with new reverence. The mentor lowered his gaze. My granddaughter watched, eyes shining, as if she could see the world shift on its axis. And in the gentle friction of that moment, hand in hand, heart in heart, I felt the balance of power tilt for the first time. Not because I had demanded it, but because truth, once spoken, has a gravity all its own. From the margin, I saw everything. And now, when I looked toward the center, I saw something new rising. A chance not just to be included, but to be remembered. When the maitre d' appeared with the bill, he carried it like a genuine token of my son's generosity, neatly folded in a leather folder, stamped with the restaurant's crest, ready for praise. He placed it before my son, whose hand trembled as he lifted the cover. For a moment the room fell quiet again, as though even the chandeliers held their breath. My son's eyes darted over the numbers. He hesitated, the polite smile fading into confusion. "I thought the foundation covered," he began, voice uncertain as he glanced at me. I leaned forward, feeling the burn of every unacknowledged check and every silent sacrifice. "It does," I said, calm but unmistakable. "For causes, not for comfort built on forgetting." His face paled as understanding flickered in his eyes. He reached into his pocket, fingers brushing the envelope I had placed beside his plate hours ago. Slowly he pulled it out and slipped his thumb beneath the flap. The parchment inside was crisp, the handwriting deliberate and unadorned. He unfolded it, and as he read, the truth of every line unfolded in that tense air. Date 2022, Scholarship Fund for Culinary Students, $50,000. 2023, Endowment for Staff Training and Benefits, $75,000. A 2024, Renovation Grant for Kitchen Expansion, $100,000. Q1 Q3 2025, Quarterly Operating Subsidies, $200,000. Each line named the gift I had given discreetly, each dollar a testament to my faith in their dreams and in their gratitude. At the bottom, in bold and final script, a line that pierced through every unspoken apology. "No more." My son's hand shook as he set the paper on the table. The leather folder fell open, revealing the stark accounting of what they owed. Not in currency owed to the restaurant, but in recognition owed to the man who bore its weight, long before it stood here in splendor. He looked up, eyes glistening. The guests around us murmured, sensing the shift, like watching someone remove an ornate mask to reveal a face they never knew they loved. My granddaughter reached out, touching her father's arm, seeking answers in his trembling shoulders. And I saw him truly see me for the first time all evening. The father, the grandfather, the benefactor he had forgotten. The son who had once sought my blessing, now sought forgiveness. The man who had stood at the margin now stood at the center of reckoning. No one spoke. The bill folder lay empty, its purpose dissolved. The real receipt, etched in ink, in memory, in the quiet filing of truth, hung between us, unblurred by candlelight or politeness. In that hush I felt both sorrow and relief. Sorrow for a bond stretched thin by neglect, relief that honesty had finally claimed its place at the table. And as I reached across to close the folder, sealing our debts in silence, I knew the balance had changed forever. I rose once more, the weight of every unspoken word pressing down like the last leaf clinging to a winter branch. There was no soft applause, no hurried handshakes, no pat on the back to honor a guest of distinction. Instead, I felt the hush of still air, a reverent quiet that carried the residue of all the moments they had once shared without me, now stretched into eternity. With measured steps, I walked past the table where my son stood, eyes downcast, unable to meet my gaze. I felt the soft rumble of the restaurant's heart as I threaded through chairs and linen, through faces that had been my constellations, now dimmed by regret. The door swung open and the cold air wrapped around me like an old friend, clear and bracing after the fevered tension inside. My granddaughter's small hand slipped into mine, her grip both tender and tentative. She walked beside me under the street lamp glow, her coat too light, her hair catching the breeze in golden tendrils. She looked up with wide eyes, as if seeing a world renewed. "Will you still come to my graduation?" she asked, voice soft against the nighttime hush. I paused on the sidewalk, the city's distant hum, a lullaby of possibility. Her question hung between us, a fragile bridge across years of absence and misunderstanding. I turned to her, my heart catching in my throat, feeling the weight of her hope and the echo of my own choices. "Only," I said slowly, If you remember who helped pay the tuition." Her eyes widened, not with anger but with dawning clarity, as though she glimpsed the invisible ledger of love I had kept for her sake. She nodded, pressing my hand with a promise unspoken but deeply felt. And then I continued walking, each step a letting go and a holding on. The streetlights cast pools of warmth on the pavement, guiding me forward. I didn't look back, yet I carried the night's revelations in my soul, bright as unextinguished embers. There was no carriage waiting, no cavalcade to herald my return, only the empty street and the weight of a name they would now speak with newfound reverence. Because sometimes departure is not an end, but an opening, a last gift wrapped in the quiet dignity of truth. And as I walked into the night, I knew the real journey was just beginning. A week had passed, the city's bustle carrying on as if nothing had changed, until that morning, when the restaurant doors swung open to a hush of anticipation. Inside the foyer, beneath the soft glow of wall sconces, they had placed a new plaque. Polished brass letters gleamed against the dark wood paneling. Founding Benefactor. And beneath it, my name, etched with a weight that no louder fanfare could match. I entered quietly, heart thrumming at the sight of my own legacy laid bare for all to see. Patrons paused mid-step, servers halted mid-waltz, and even the chef, who had once toasted another man for my scholarship, stepped forward, eyes moist with recognition. My granddaughter nestled at my side, her small hand warm in mine, and she pointed up with a smile that caught in her throat. "That's you, Grandpa," she whispered, awe dancing in her voice. "You built this." It wasn't guilt that had driven them to honor me. It wasn't a reluctance born of obligation. It was something rarer, an acknowledgement that truth, when suppressed, gathers power until it can no longer be contained, and when it finally broke through, it shone with a clarity that demanded respect. As I stood before the plaque, memories flooded me. The first check signed in a cramped office, the late-night calls to ensure payroll, the secret visits to the vineyards under moonlit skies. Every silent act of devotion, every gesture made without expectation of thanks, had led to this moment. My name, undeniable, shining where everyone could read it. People approached me then, staff and strangers alike, offering handshakes and heartfelt thanks. My son, eyes red-rimmed, embraced me without hesitation, words of apology and pride tumbling from his lips. My daughter-in-law's smile held genuine warmth for the first time in months. And the mentor, once lauded in my place, bowed his head, a silent promise in his gaze that he would teach others to honor the past. They greeted me by name, not as a courtesy, but as a recognition of every unseen sacrifice that had shaped their world. And in those greetings, I found the power of grace, spoken softly, yet echoing louder than any clamor of pride. Standing there, plaque before me, I felt a quiet victory settle into my bones. Not a triumph over my family, but a triumph of truth, resilience, and the enduring strength of those who build without ever seeking the spotlight. For in the end, a name on the wall is more than letters etched in metal. It is a promise kept, a story reclaimed, and a beacon for the generations who follow, reminding them that true legacy is not what you demand, but what you give, quietly, faithfully, and without regret.